hurricanes and hearts are broke from older pains. If the heat don't drive you half insane, well, I bet my mama will. I bet my mama will.
Welcome to the Marinade, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. Each episode, we welcome musicians, actors, comedians, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, anyone who creates art to talk about how and why we make stuff. This is episode 200, feature episode 200, y'all, and our guest is Evan Barber. Evan is a singer and songwriter from Southwest Georgia who grew up playing Southern rock and jam band songs with his best friends. His most recent record, Until the Thunder, is a personal collection of roots music that finds Barber painting pictures of life and love in the South. I am relatively new to Evan's music. This is a true Marinade Universe episode, as you will hear in the conversation. I love when I get connected with people like Evan through the show. I've been reflecting a lot as we pass 8 years, y'all. We've been doing this for 8 years, and I've been reflecting a lot on the friendships I've made through the show, and it's overwhelming in the best way. I caught up with Evan via Zoom after becoming inspired by his live set at the legendary historic Grant's Lounge in downtown Macon earlier this year. Everyone, it is my pleasure to bring you my conversation with Evan Barber.
From Mid-Bay Bridge at night. Now remember counting how you never let me win. Said that I could have the good side.
Hey, man.
Hey, what's up, bud? How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
You hear me all right?
Yeah, let me just double check my audio settings, but you sound pretty good. How do I sound on your end?
You're good, man. I can hear you loud and clear.
Sweet. Thanks for doing this, man. Thanks for being flexible. I'm stoked to talk to you.
Yeah, man. I feel the same way. I appreciate you having me on, and glad we could get it done.
Yeah, truly a fun one, man. This is one of those that is kind of like very much the spirit of the Marinade, and why I started this thing in the first place was like building community. And like I 2 months ago didn't know who the fuck you were. And now I'm like crazy about your music, and I got to see you live, and we connected, and it's just so great. Like for context for folks listening, I was on my way to Bonnaroo on my Grounded Summer tour, and I stopped in Macon, and so I just put it out on the internet. Hey, what's going on in Macon? Any suggestions or whatever? And this long time, friend and fan of the show, JW, said, "Oh, you got to check out Evan Barber. Like this, he's playing tonight, and you got to check out." Why is the name of that venue escaping me right now? What is it?
Grant's Lounge.
Yes, Grant's, and which I had heard about before.
Yeah, dude, everybody. I think the Beatles played in Grant's at some point.
That's so wild, dude. Like just like. Such a cool spot, and everybody was so cool, and it was everything I wanted to. It's kind of divey, and like I'm not sure how many people paid for a ticket that night. I know I paid. There's just like regulars were there. It's just like
I think they start charging it. Maybe it's like 9 o'clock, and so you always get like about 20 people who come in about 8:30 and kind of chill. But man, they do those guys that. They do such a good thing in downtown Macon they've got Grants and the Capitol Theater and lots of stuff. And they just, they take care of every musician that comes to. They do a great job. They're some of the best folks around.
That's awesome to hear, man. And it was definitely that vibe, that feel the whole night. There was such a celebratory kind of feel. I was just looking at my notes, and there's just so much that I feel like we're going to have to talk about. Cause I always, anytime I journal all the time. So while I wrote these notes while I was watching you play.
Nice. Oh, cool. I'm looking forward to these questions. That'll be
yeah. There's just there's so many things, man. Let's kind of before we get into all of that though.
Yeah.
let's just sort of like, as a way of introduction, for folks, like, what are some of your like your early relationship with music? You know,
And
what
I,
is that like?
man, my parents both. My mother is a great piano player, and so that's like my first thing. And she's like read sheet music, sight read, play everything. So she could play anything in the world. But as a kid, I used to get her to play. Like "Leaving on a Jet Plane" was like my favorite song when I was 5 years old. She could have played me, Beethoven, anything in the world. But I would just sit around and ask for that. But both of my parents listened to really good music. My dad was a huge Tom Petty fan, and so between my mom playing the piano and riding in the truck with my dad, listening to lots of Tom Petty rock and roll, it's probably my first real memories of music. The first things that I was into, could decide for myself.
Man, that makes a lot of sense, especially the Petty influence. I mean, who that makes rock and roll kind of music these days wasn't influenced by Petty, right? And plus, also, you're in Southwest Georgia at the time, right?
Yeah, for sure. And,
So, like, you're right across the border there,
right, yeah,
right?
exactly. And that was a thing that I didn't even recognize until I got a lot older. I was always, for me, it was just like Tom Petty's the biggest name in the world. And then it wasn't until years later that I was like, oh, well, there's kind of a regional thing that happened. So to me, it was, he was everything. And my parents were the same way. But yeah, man, he's the truest form of rock and roll. And I think that he has this wild ability to, convey these massive thoughts into little 3 minute spaces. A lot of songwriters get long winded or lots of verses. He always sticks with the rock and roll MO, but somehow still gets the message across. Was a very gifted writer.
Do you think about that with your writing? Are you purposely economical?
I try to be, because I not that I mean I love the I'm a huge Dylan fan. I love the songs that have the verses, but for me, I always like to keep the idea of the song in mind. And for me, a song is 3 or 4 minutes, and it's a concise picture of a thought. And so I try to use the Petty model of still being melodic, and enjoyable, but not sacrificing the value of the story, if that makes sense.
Makes a ton of sense. So, thinking of stories, and you told a couple on stage that night that I saw you, like some of the stories behind some of the songs. For you, like, what is it in a story that needs to be told in a song?
Man, I guess there can be a number of things. I like I guess the thing that usually captures my attention is, and again, Petty was great at it, and Townes Van Zandt was another guy's one of my favorites. But they take the everyday thought or the common thought and turn it into a story. Like I always go to Poncho and Lefty, on the town stuff, just because it is such a hit. But also, it's like a relatively simple story of betrayal. But then in that last verse, it turns to the, Poncho needs your prayers is true, but save a few for Lefty too. So it kind of takes the old, like, you never know what someone's going through. There's always two sides of the story, and turns it into this beautiful, eloquent thing. So that's one of not that I can do it like those guys, but something I try to do is take a commonplace thought or feeling and try to put it into a spot that lets you think more about what it means. There's so many things, especially if you're from like South Georgia or anywhere down this way. There's a lot of one-liners, a lot of quick things that people say, and so I like to try to dissect those in some way and make that little one-liner maybe 3 or 4 minutes of a thought.
Man, that's such a great point. Like, I live in Orlando, which is kind of like this sort of, I don't know, weird oasis in some ways, but also kind of outlier in the middle of the South, in the middle of Florida. But I'm from Kentucky originally, and then I grew up in Ocala, Florida.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay, so folks, and I've thinking about this lately because I spent a lot of time. I had to cut that trip short to come home and help out with my family, my mom and dad, and I spent like a couple of weeks with my parents, and coming out of that trip through the South, and then coming back to Ocala, which is very much a southern town. I think, the debate about whether Florida is the South, Ocala is, whether, you know,
That's what I always tell people is like really when you cross the line until you get close to some ocean, South Georgia and North Florida are, you know,
yeah, it's the South. Yeah. Yeah. And, that's interesting because like I think that I can relate a lot in the creative work that I do in songwriting, storytelling, whatever it might be. Those some of those lines that you grow up on, if you grew up in the South, you grow up on them and then you don't, and some of them are like almost cliche and then you don't really think about it, but when you dissect them, they're kind of rich with history and rich with imagery. That's a really interesting point.
yeah. There's so much, and you know, like you say, you learn them from a young age, and they're just second nature to you. And then one day you think about right, like how much history was involved in getting to where that was a common thing to say. And so it's a something I try to keep in my mind. And you know, especially if you try to look for inspiration or stories wherever you go. And you know, my dad is that way. He's real clever guy. You know, always any question you ask him, you're going to get about a 4-word answer. And my grandfathers were that way, and so I've always tried to let that be a thing of just, you know, everyone you talk to has something. So can you actually get a story out of it? Can you get beyond the baseline of the quick reaction and see, you know, kind of where they came from, where it came from? It's a cool thing.
I said that dog won't hunt the other day, and it was just one of those things. And I said it around somebody that had never heard that before, and I was just sort of, I just said it like, you say it,
Yeah,
like it just,
you don't even think about it.
yeah.
And someone who's not around here is like, wait, what did you say?
What'd you say? Yeah, yeah. Man, that's fun. What is your? Okay, so I didn't mean to get into into the music this early, but now you got me thinking about it, especially as we think about place. Until the Thunder has this great song that kind of like takes place in Florida, in North Florida. Can you kind of talk about that song and that story?
Yeah. So my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, my dad's dad, loved to go, loved saltwater fishing. And he had a place when I was a kid in Destin, Florida, which now is kind of a beach mecca. When I was a child, it was just a relatively small fishing town. And so he and I would drive down there a lot. And he was not he was a very kind man, but he was, grew up military background. He was very matter of fact. There wasn't a lot of small talk with him. And so when we would drive to the beach, we would listen to, he loved Ray Stevens. Ray Stevens, the songwriter, is from where I'm from, Albany, Georgia, originally. And so my grandfather had this fierce loyalty to listen to almost nothing but Ray Stevens. And so we would drive down there, and like I say, it wasn't much for conversation. So we would listen to some Ray Stevens for the first little bit. And then there's the chorus line of that song is, I remember counting cows and how you'd never let me win. And so we would play a game called cow poker. And it was just, two passengers in a car. You count the cows on your respective side of the road, and whoever has the most cows at the end of the trip wins. But I was probably 7 years old, and my grandfather was, 60s. And so he just wanted me to be quiet. And so after we listened to the record, we would get to cow poker, and he would keep me counting because it was a thing that I was still working on. I was at the point where I'd just recently been like, I can count to 100 now. So it's kind of a big deal. And so he would have me count, and then he always would add these rules, we passed a power line, we passed a church, we passed a horse farm, so you lose all your cows. And I was too young to recognize what was going on. I just think, man, that's tough. And he would always tell me, I'll tell you what, when we're on the way back, I'll trade sides with you, and then you'll probably win since we're trading sides. And so it's just an ongoing thing. And, he passed away when I was relatively young. And so that's always a funny memory to me of how good of a job he did of keeping me quiet and enthralled for a 4-hour trip. I think about it all the time. It was
those motherfuckers. So like I think about my dad did something similar to me. And this I connected with that song the first time I heard it really deeply. My dad one time, I'll never forget this, and I don't know why this particular thing stuck in my head. So it was so sticky in my brain and continues to be. But there was a road trip we were taking because we moved to Florida when I was like 7, And so we would go to Kentucky every summer. You know, we would
Yeah.
road trip to Kentucky every summer. And there was one particular time, I guess I was just feeling real talkative, and he told me that you could rub a pin if I rubbed a penny hard enough, like I could bend it. And I thought that would be the coolest fucking trick in the world. I was probably about the same age. And it kept me quiet for like,
Yeah.
because I was determined to bend this fucking penny.
That was my thing. Is I was always just like, I mean, we probably took that same ride, 30 times as a child, and I can like remember distinctly thinking, today is the day that I am going to be the victor of this cow poker match.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah, yeah.
just and that song it was interesting when that song first came out. Different people would connect with, but it was cool because I never speak that it's my granddad by name. And a thing that I would notice is different people thought it was about whoever their closest connection was to. Like I had a friend whose sister had passed away recently, and right when I wrote it, he was like, "Did you write that about your sister?" And I was like, "Well, no," but and so as I would talk to different people, they'd be like, "Man, that reminds me of writing this with my mom." And so everybody had, like you say, some experience with an adult. And really, what they want to do is keep you quiet, but it turns into a thing that like occupies your brain for hours at the time.
Yeah. Oh man, that's beautiful. I mean, that's kind of the highest compliment as a songwriter, right? That
Yeah,
like, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. When different people can forge a connection, I think that's all you can hope for. That you tell your story and someone can find a common thread that makes them feel something. I think that's the what you're looking to do. Like you say, that is the highest compliment for sure.
Okay, so you have a line that comes up, or you have a memory like that, for example, going from the inspiration to the finished product. What is your process? What does it look like?
And it varies, I guess, at times. I mean, I think everyone has the kind of there's some songs, it's almost like you didn't even write them. They just happen so quickly. And I have a host of those, but for the most part, I am well, for one, I'm a horrible procrastinator. So usually when that one line inspires me, I'll get a little something to build around it, whether it's the line, the thought, the situation, whatever it is. I usually come with a good, solid thought, and I'll write that down. Not necessarily, maybe even as a piece of the writing. Just here's the general objective, and then over time I'll piece it together. And I am so bad about. I'll have a verse and a chorus that came pretty quickly, and then I may let it sit for months, and I just kind of wait for those moments that I can bridge the gap or find a common thread. I'll have the one situation, and immediately, let's say half the song comes out. I try not to force it. I don't like the idea. I mean, I hear, and a lot of songwriters that I admire say, you have to do the job. You just need to write, write, write. But I prefer the natural moments, and so I try to keep the radar open anytime I'm out in the world for
Hmm.
if it's a song I'm working on or whatever it is. How do those ideas? How close are they? What can I pull from the future that will work with this song? And so I try to leave some open space to give myself a chance to be as authentic as possible instead of trying to force the next verse or force the completion of the thought. I like to see where it is, and it'll change from time to time. It's I've written songs where when I started them, they were an idea about something someone had said or something I had seen, and then by the end of writing it, I'm like, oh, that's actually what I think and what I feel. You just needed the push from the outside world, I guess.
Mm,
So,
hmm.
so my process can differ, but I'm big on the initial thought and idea, and then trying to just add the working parts to it over a little more time than maybe the average writer uses.
Is that like pen to paper written down somewhere? Is it in your head?
I always go pen to paper. Now, a lot of it initially is a note in my phone, a voice note, because you're on the road so much, and I will forget the thought. I always admire. They say that Ronnie Van Zant, used to say that if you couldn't remember it, it wasn't worth keeping.
Hmm.
And I just feel like maybe he had less to worry about on a daily basis than I do because I forget with moments. So I'll usually go phone note, and then maybe if I'm on the road for 10 days, it'll all be on the phone. And then when I get home, I'll go to paper with it because there's something about the physical nature of the pen. It when I put it in my phone or in the voice note, it's just the idea. It's not until I get the pen to paper that it really becomes a creative effort. And so a lot of times I go through the notes, and half the time I'm like, I don't even know what this note means, or, I'll never write this song. And so usually if I have 20 ideas down, maybe I end up really honing in on 3 or 4 of those, and they'll go to paper. And then from there, it's kind of a work in progress to see what they are or how they exist, I guess.
I don't think I've ever heard that Ronnie Van Zant quote. I absolutely love Leonard Skinner, and like one of my favorite bands of all time, one of my greatest influences creatively. But that's an interesting point you made about like, because sometimes you'll hear like there's a famous story about how Neil Young will just like walk away from a situation if he has a song idea.
Right.
I'm like, how do you? Cool, that's a rad rock and roll story, but how do you maintain like relationships?
Right. Well, and going back to Petty, there's a Petty quote. I've read so much information about Petty in my life, but there's a quote somewhere where he says that he was divorced from his first wife. It was mainly because of a legal pad, because he's the kind of guy, he says, he doesn't know where the ideas come from or what they are, so he never ignores the muse. And so he said that his wife just got so tired of, like they're at dinner, it's the anniversary, and he's just like, hold that thought, and pulls out the pad and writes something down. And so I admire those guys. But for me, and I think especially Petty in his early days, and Ronnie Van Zant, was young when he passed away. Yeah. I guess too, it's that kind of thing that they were in positions where their lives, there wasn't a lot of outside circumstance. That was the way they lived. You read that Skinner stuff where those guys were just living together, fighting, figuring it all out. And so maybe if my mind had a little less else to worry about, then I could do that thing. But like you say, there's no way to live your everyday life. And that's the beauty of technology. I assume if Ronnie and those guys had a cell phone, that he wouldn't have been against punching an idea in and looking back to it later,
Yeah, man. Okay. This is all going down like different roads I didn't think we were going to touch on. Cause like one of the things about the Macon experience is I really dove in this time. That was the second year in a row I'd stopped, maybe third year I'd stopped in Macon. I really dove into the music history there, right? Especially the Almonds, right?
Oh, right.
And I was thinking about that because I went to the Allman Brothers Museum and the Big House, right? And which is, for folks listening, worth a trip, like a special trip.
It's as great oh man, it's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. If you give a shit about music or creativity, or especially the Almonds, they do a great job. It's worth the trip.
And so much of a personal touch. It's cool because you feel like you're getting a little more of a look at the people as opposed to just the band or just the music. They do a great job with that thing.
And that's part of it, is that when you're there, you can picture yourself living their day-to-day life back then, which does not seem like a thing that's possible today.
I agree totally. And it used to seem like I can remember being young and in the first bands I was in, like even talking like we were going to do that, like, man, we'll just all get a house together and just live this creative world. But I think that we're so connected to the world now. One, we don't feel the need, and two, we barely have the capability to just exist in one place like that. It's like I've always had band members because I've, come up in the age of technology and access. So I've always had band members that lived hours away or states away even. And you can, we're just able to do it. And I think for those guys, if you didn't live with someone, there's a good chance you wouldn't see them or speak to them for months at a time. And we have the resources to, be in contact whenever we like.
Well, finding some sort of balance there, and this is something I'm interested in exploring with you, is like, how do we find the balance, do you think? Because there's something to be said for that connection that you're talking about, right? And being able to have band members from all over the country. But there's also something to be said for we're in a room together and we don't have distractions and we're hammering it out.
Exactly. And even just for us as people to just, to have time for independent thought, because we spend so much time reacting, being prompted by a phone call or something we see on social media, whatever it is. It's really hard to make yourself take that time to just not respond and not do the things that are being thrown at you, and to just kind of take a moment of like, let me just stop. Like, well, I try to write in the mornings. When I wake up in the morning, I of course look at my phone to make sure there's no emergencies or things that are time sensitive that I need to attend to. And then I try to take about that first hour of the day when my brain has not yet gotten into the mode of handling everything. And so I have kind of that, I guess, just naked brain, so I try to do my actual writing then, because I feel like that's the only time of the day that my thoughts are not occupied by some outside source, be it, just any number of things, paying a bill, a phone call, whatever it is. So I try to take that one part of the day to remove myself from that. But more to your point, I still like, technology is good for, hey, here's the song, let's learn it, whatever. But you still, for me at least, the creativity, kind of like the pen to paper, when I'm in the presence of the guys in the band or whoever it is, there's another thing that happens, in the same way that putting the pen to the paper does a thing. A lot of times when I'm writing, I'll hold a guitar. I don't even play it. I just hold it. And for some reason that, gets a physical part of me to engage. And I think it's the same way, like you're saying, when you're in a room and it's like, okay, let's do it, because that is the strongest thing. And I even try to, like, when we record, I don't ever send out digital stuff of the songs. I always like to have the guys come in, like, if it's a song a day or two a day, I like to, because you pick your creative partners because you respect, admire, enjoy whatever they do. And so I like the honest reaction. I feel like, especially in music, there are so many patterns and set things that if you have some time to spend with a piece of music, you start to reference it. Is it similar to this? Is it a blues progression? Is it a country lick? You have all this time to think about everything, and you put it in a box. But I think when you are just face to face with someone and here's how the song goes, now let's go from here, then you get that kind of honest response that can only really happen with people in the moment working together. And I like to see, I'm always surprised by what you get, because I'll have an idea of what a song is because I've written it, I've spent some time with it. But then when I give it to the guys, I try for within an hour at least of them ever hearing it, I'd like to be tracking it, because that way we haven't yet decided what it is. We're just giving the most honest response to whatever's there that we can. So I think there's ultimate value in the non-technological aspect of being together. Just people's energy, you feed off of it. It makes a difference.
Man, that sounds great, and it makes a lot of sense. Um, Especially having seen you live before I had time to really dive into your recorded music, which was fun, because then like because I love what's on record, but like the live show, you and your band's awesome, or at least the band I saw, like they're really good players,
Yep.
and y'all seem to have a very cool synergy that it sounds like is forged in those organic moments.
It is certainly, man. And then the guy like Austin, the bass player that was with him, man, he is, we played music together, about as long as either of us. We met, we were in different bands when we met, but we're around the same age. And shortly after we met, we would do some stuff together. And so he is kind of my creative rock. When I am thinking of something, writing how I'm going to play it, anything there, he is the person that I reference as I know I kind not that I know what he'll do, but we're so similar in our musical upbringing that he's a really good reference and a really good thing for me to lean on. And like I said, we're really all you don't. And I've had I've had band members in bands that I was not so friendly with, but all of the guys that are currently in the group, we're all pretty good friends. We get along pretty well, and we don't have a lot of the I don't just I guess that we're just they're easy guys to get along with, and they have a good idea of what I'm doing, so we don't get crossed up in that way. So it's a that's a good group, man. That like I said, those guys I would for what I like out of music, I would put my guys up against anybody. I know a lot of people say that, but it's one of those things where I'm lucky enough to have guys, one that I can count on, and two that creatively, if I saw them in another band, I would think, wow, what a great band, what a great guitar player. They're guys that I admire as well as guys I can count on in a personal setting.
Well, I mean, I met those guys, and like what you're saying right now is what I perceived, and this is my language, but like it just seemed like I'm watching this shit hot band that there didn't seem to be a lot of ego involved.
We really try to remove that because I mean I've been that guy, and I'm sure they have in situations too, but we've all come up. Joe, that guitar player, man, is just and he's of everyone in the group currently, Joe's the guy that I've known for the least amount of time, but he we met in a really cool way. He came and played. I did a little recording session a couple years ago in Muscle Shoals, and Joe just came in as the steel guitar player on the session, and we ended up not really using some of the stuff, but he and I got along so well in the studio that we just stayed in touch. And then a little time after that, we got to talking about making a record together. And then from there, once we did some of that, we thought, man, let's play some music together. And so he is, he has no ego. He is just a true creative. There is, nothing. And then, like I say, those other guys, we've so much that we've probably been through some of the ego clashing that you see, but we're past it now. And so it's a good, easy spot to operate. And we all have a mutual respect, I guess. I know that I can't play the drums we're all comfortable that everyone has a part in the band, and none of us are gonna know how to do it better than them. I think that's an important thing in any creative endeavor, is to recognize who you've got up there. It's like there's a reason that this is the guy you have, so it's probably best to not tell him how to do his job. It's the way I
Yeah, that seems like incredibly good advice, especially as a band leader, right? Is like leading by trusting your people. I mean, in any endeavor, right? I feel like the best bosses I've worked for have put the best people around them and then trusted them to do their job.
You're here for a reason, I trust that you're going to do your job. And if you can have some level of success, like say in a workplace or a creative endeavor, whatever it is, if you can put that amount of trust out there and get a good result, then it just multiplies, And so I'm to the point with those guys now that, you could really close my eyes and plug my ears, and I'd be comfortable that when I started playing, those guys were going to be right where I needed them to be, It's a lovely thing to, you want people you can count on in any setting, but it's even better when you can count on them as people. But then you also know if you come up with something strange, that they know enough about you and have enough of a skill set to not leave you hanging. They're like the greatest safety net that anyone could hope for.
There is, okay, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable with this compliment, but I'm going to go here anyway, right? Because everything you're saying right now is making me think about this moment that I wrote down in my notebook that night. Watching the live show, hearing these incredible songs. You also played a lot of covers that I want to talk about too, because you played some it was like a jukebox for my favorite bands, which is super fun. But not a jukebox because you were doing your own spin on these covers, and like I'm kind of people who listen to this know that I'm critical of covers,
Yeah.
and yeah, you were crushing, man. And but there's like one of the things I wrote down is that on stage you have this like, and Ben Nichols has been on this show before.
Oh yeah, man, I'm a
Eh,
huge.
yeah, it makes a ton of sense, right?
Yeah,
But like Ben has this effortless cool on stage that is also his normal personality, right?
yeah,
He's just that way.
yeah, he's like
Um,
cool guy. You know,
he's
he
like
is.
the cool, yeah. But I wrote down that your stage presence has that Ben Nichols like effortlessly cool kind of vibe, and I wonder how much you think about like on stage the live performance. Is that just you?
Yeah, I try to, and I have definitely gone through stages, I guess, where I had an idea of a stage presence, but then I guess authenticity is the key, and so I try to, for better or worse. I mean, I've had shows where there people have been like, this guy talks too fucking much. Like, yeah, I came to hear a band. Like, I had a friend of mine manages a club that we played at for years, and he told me one day after we got done, and he said that a lady came back there and was like, "We paid for tickets to a concert, and this guy's just out here talking to his friends from high school because there's some guys I went to school with." And so I was just, I was telling, just like I would normally do, tell a story about the song. But if one of the guys that I wrote this, one of the guys that inspired this idea, or like my buddy Todd was there, and his dad was this character in my life, and so there's a lot of little one-liners that came from him. And so for better or worse, I guess that I try to be as close to normal as I can be, because I think that it's recognizable. I think when somebody's full of shit on a stage, like I don't need the show. I want to know what you're about, and I like that. I like a personal connection. I think that is, uh, you know, I'm trying to think of how to say this. I want it to be as personal feeling like, and I like songs that are written that way too. I don't necessarily care for, the huge, eloquent lyrics. I don't want to be necessarily impressed by an artist's ability. I want to feel like we're communicating, like there's a connection. And so I try to, I would like to think that I'm as much like myself on stage as I am in any other situation.
Okay.
That's the objective.
That comes through on record too. That's an interesting point because these are masterfully written songs, but it's not like, it does make sense to me that like Petty is an influence. It makes sense to me, all the things that you're saying about your approach to it, because it does feel like a conversation. Like that, your record Until the Thunder feels like a conversation. Hadn't processed it that way until you're saying that, but it does.
That is the ultimate creative compliment, because that's what I had a conversation with a buddy of mine. He was showing me some stuff that he liked and how great it was. And I said, yeah, this is really, really good, but I feel like I'm reading the Gettysburg Address or something. And I want conversational nature, because I assume that if I'm listening to something that's well written, that guy is an intelligent person. I don't need his vocabulary. I don't need Shakespearean writing for my song. I want to feel just a personal connection to it, and so that's always the objective. So you saying that's the ultimate compliment I could hope for. That the record is like a conversation, because that's what you try to think of when you're making the record. Is each song is a one thought in a greater, like I said, conversation. So thank you very much.
For sure. So, okay, so can you divulge who the artist or artists were that were that your buddy was showing you, or do you feel comfortable? We don't have to go there.
I'm trying to think. There's guys out of Texas, and I can't remember the name. The name is the something Brothers, and the song is a really cool song, and it's about this like Civil War general who has this change of heart mid-war, and his brother is still fighting on the same side and feeling the same way. And so it's a beautiful story and it's well written. But it's what I was telling my friend Neil, and I wish I could recall their name, because my statement was not so much a that I didn't like what was going on. I was just, he was like, his whole lead up had been like, "You're gonna love this," and I was like, "Well, I do love this, but also this is a lot for me, you know." And the song,
Yeah.
like 7 minutes, you know, had like 8 or 9 verses and all of this stuff. And that's what I said. I was like, you know, for me, this is how I like to read. But when listening, I like it. You know, like, yeah, Petty always says, you know, "Don't bore us, get to the chorus." I like a concise song. You know, that's just, I guess, what I grew up on was, you know, Southern rock stuff on the radio. And so it's just, even though my taste has maybe turned to more of the songwriter guys, that's still, when I think of a song, I think of, you know, a pretty short amount of time to try to get you to understand this entire vision. So if I can think of it, at some point
All
I'll
right. Yeah.
think of our own here and let you know who it was.
Yeah, or shoot me a message later. I am super
Yeah,
curious because that sounds like my shit. It sounds like something I'd be very into.
I'll send you the song. It's cool. It's really
Yeah. Um, well, speaking of, like you said, you're into the songwriter stuff now a lot, but like that set included like at the end of your last set, and man, you gave me my money's worth. I think I was the only person who paid for a ticket, but you gave me my money's worth, and then the folks that were there for free, their money's worth too. And you played a lot of your stuff, but then you also played some covers. There was a run where you played like a Whiskey Town song.
yeah.
You played Foster the People. You played this like killer Atlantic City
Oh yeah,
cover
yeah.
that didn't sound anything like I had never heard it played that way.
I,
You played did you play Waiting Around to Die? Yes, you played Waiting Around to Die. You
yeah,
talked about Towns earlier. Just a blistering Waiting Around to Die, which was so fucking cool.
yeah, yeah,
Charlie Daniels, you
yeah,
played Stroker Ace,
yeah,
like, and then so this is something I wanted to ask you about because you played that song, Stroker Ace, right?
yeah.
And then you had made a joke, and I don't remember the details of it, but about something about the Black Crows and Mike Cooley. And then, so here, stay with me because this
Yeah.
is like we're getting in the weeds nerdy here, okay?
I
There's like
like it.
8 people who are going to understand all these references. And then you played a Cooley song, Where the
Yeah.
Devil Don't Stay, okay? Now, for folks who aren't Drive By Truckers fans, which is probably no one listening to this podcast, by the way, everyone listening is a Drive By Truckers fan. Um, Stroker Ace is Mike Cooley's nickname.
Right. Right. It is.
And the famous symbol, the West Freed drawing that is like all over their artwork, has become known by fans as the Cooley bird. And it's a black cartoon bird.
Yeah.
And I wondered how intentional that whole sequence of events was.
And you have just connected those better than I ever have consciously. But I live in that, you know, like the first time that I ever, you know, heard Patterson say, you know, Stroker Ace, you know, that I was immediately, because I grew up, I have a cool Charlie Daniels connection in my life. So I loved Charlie Daniels as a kid. The Charlie Daniels Greatest Hits record. I even, you know, that was like, my mom used to get just so frustrated with me because I would, during Devil Went Down to Georgia, you know, there was the son of a bitch, and I always like let her know, you know, that I was cool because I was listening to music that cusses and all these things. And so Charlie Daniels was one of my earliest things. And then years later in my career, I had a road manager, a guy named Dewey Hall. And Dewey was a lot older than us, but in a Macon tie too. He had been the studio manager at Capricorn like 73 through 76 or 7.
Oh, wow.
And then he had gone on the road with CDB with Charlie Daniels as Charlie's guitar tech. And so for years, we would always get to, if we were in a town near him or anything, we would get to go like we were part of the Charlie Daniels band. And then years later, I went to school in Athens, and played a lot around there. And so then I had a kind of similar thing to truckers, because in the world I was coming up, they were kind of the kings of the thing that I was hoping to do in this part of the world. And we had some similar people in our worlds. And so I have never consciously put the two together like you did, but I had a similar, I guess, existence with those two bands at different times in my life. And I have always loved the stroke race, because to me, I used to have a booking agent, and he always said that if he could, whenever he died, he wanted to be reincarnated as Mike Cooley's little brother. And because he just thought, Mike Cooley was like the coolest guy. And I would always say, yeah, he's Stroker fucking Ace from the song. You know what I mean? The ladies love him. The men fear him. He's the coolest. So you're the first person to consciously help me tie the two together. But I've definitely always had a thing there. And I've never once thought about it until you just brought it up. So thank you.
It was, dude, it was such, thank you. It was like such a, I mean, the Drive-By Truckers, I always say, like, people ask what's your favorite band or whatever. I have started just referring to the greater Drive-By Truckers universe.
Yeah.
Isbell and all the things that Bobby Matt is involved in, and Dexatines, and like I could go on and on. Like these bands, man.
All right, man. It's incredible, man.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I'm that's the truckers were a thing for me. There was a time in my life when, before the internet was so prevalent, and knowing what you liked and tying things together for you, that I always looked for something that was I grew up on a lot of country music. And like I said, I grew up on a lot of Petty, and of course I listened to, like the grunge rock stuff as a kid. And so for years I looked for, that was what I envisioned creatively, was some way that was crossing the Southern storytelling with a rock and roll edge. And so when I came across the Truckers, I was like, oh, wow, here it is. And it kind of reset my whole musical world, and even led me back into things. Like like I said, tons of Petty as a kid, then tons of Truckers, in my late teenage, early adult years. And then that kind of brought me back around to Petty from a more, looking at it as a songwriter and as an adult, like really listening to it. And so the Truckers were like probably the biggest thing in my life that ever took me from a musical listener, really, when I got there with them, because they were doing the thing that I had tried to create in my head, like a rock and roll band, Southern rock influences, still had the folk country storyteller thing. So they were the first thing ever that I was like, oh, this exists in the world. What I am thinking of is not far-fetched. I just hadn't been connected to it, And so I'm with you right there. Is that like it's my musical world, especially that, like, I don't know, I mean, maybe those first 5 or 6 Truckers records, are just everything up to a really Decoration Day, and even the one after that, Don't Be So Easy on Yourself's on the record. I don't know, but those records for me were where I really understood that there was a place in the world for the thing that existed in my brain.
They didn't by any means even come close to inventing the sort of alt country thing, but I do think that history will look back on them, and is starting to, as one of the more influential bands in American music, because there are so many artists right now that are making music that would not exist without the Truckers.
And yeah, I agree with you totally. There were definitely, like, we talked Whiskey Town, and there's so many bands that did a lot of it, but and obviously in the Isbell, when Isbell's in the Truckers, especially because they were also maybe one of the first bands that I saw their songs carrying such weight and having such success, because I loved the early, like the Gangsta Billy and Peace of Deliverance. I loved that stuff. But when you got into the Isbell records, he's so melodically strong and writes such beautiful things that it gave it this hard Truckers edge But then this guy who just has these infectious melodies, and like even on Devil Don't Stay is a Cooley song, but like that Isbell guitar lick. And so they were the first ones that I ever saw. Not that they ever reached some wild, commercial, radio hit success, but they were the first ones that I saw, you know, really able to kind of connect to people that maybe weren't like you and I would have liked any of those bands because we were into it. They were the first ones that I ever listened to a lot. And then all of a sudden I look around and be like, there's a lot of 20-year-old girls here. They crossed some plateau. They were the first band that I ever saw really do that, like have a really cool creative thing, not alter what they were doing at all, and kind of move into a world of wasn't so much just their cult like following. They kind of got a grand, larger appeal, and it was cool to watch.
Okay, so in Athens, like when you're there, what was the scene? What year was that, if you don't mind me asking? And then like what was the scene like there?
Like early 2000s.
Okay. God, that's a dream, dude.
Yeah, dude, it was so, man. I tell you, man, I have the coolest drive-by truckers origin story. It's one of my favorite stories in the world. When I was in school, I worked at a screen printing shop. It was called Blue Sky Screen Printing, and we did a lot of stuff. We did all the stuff for UGA and a lot of school systems, but we did a lot of band stuff as well. And so we were constantly printing, like just all kind of stuff. But the trucker put out. So I'd heard of the drive-by truckers a little bit, but not much. And so when they were on tour for the Dirty South, maybe that would have been 04, 05, somewhere in there. We were printing. They were making women's underwear with the Dirty South logo on the front. They were like thong underwear. And so it just became, none of us knew much about them or were fans of them. So it just became a thing because we were printing these underwear by like the thousands, and so it just became a joke. We were like, oh yeah, the band that sells the panties, and we were always like, how is this happening? Who are these guys doing this? And so one day, Daniel, the guy who ran the shop, came in and he was like, I got us tickets to the panty band. And we were all like, great, dude. And so, looking back on it, it was cool, but it was like a Friday, Saturday night. They were at the 40 Watt and, probably 04 maybe. So it's just like quintessential trucker show. But so we went to the show and I didn't get it right then. They were just, it was
loud,
and everybody was drunk and everyone knew the songs and I didn't know anything about them. And so I, went to the show and I was just kind of like, this is strange. But I was really looking at the merch stand because I was just like, wow, they really are selling like hundreds of pairs of women's underwear every night of their career. This is so strange. And so, so I got that, bought the record there, because I was just like, I just want something to commemorate. I'm not going to buy any women's underwear. But so I bought the Dirty South record just to kind of reference it. And then couple of days later, I'm at home spinning it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, now I do get, because in there, like I said, it was just loud ass Les Paul guitars, and the 40 Watts fucking loud anyway. And so it wasn't really until I went home with the record and listened to them that I was like, oh, that is my band. And so I came to them in a funny way, and then like I say, saw them live and kind of. They were crushing, I saw there was energy and they were doing it and they had a packed house, but I couldn't grasp it because, like I said, it was just, just killing me. And then when I got home a couple of days later and was able to listen to it, then that's when my, love affair with the band began. I was like, oh, wow, this is, you're 20 years old and you listen to something you never heard and Never Gonna Change comes on there. You're just like, this is me. I'm fucking,
Well, yeah. I mean, that was for me, like lately I've been thinking about that period of time a lot. And I'm definitely someone who is a big advocate for what's happening now in music in terms of like, not the industry, but like the music that's being made there's so much cool stuff right now. Right. But of course, you know, I turned 24 in 2004. So like, yeah, I'm nostalgic for it to some extent, right?
It's just that time, right? It's that time of your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But
You
there's
got,
like there's something I was writing today because I ended up in this really fun conversation this morning with my buddy Jordan Foley about Wilco. And uh, around that time, the process of discovery was so fun because you got into bands because you were printing their panties,
yeah,
or you know, like, or you
yeah,
got into them because of it was a fun thing.
yeah. You didn't just have this access where you could find everything at your fingertips. It was always cool. And like we were talking about earlier, is you forged that personal tie with you kind of already had it. If you got to listening to a band like that, it was because somehow personally you were tied to that band. And that's how you ended up there. And so you were able to kind of skip the step that a lot of times now you hear one song, you know, something comes on a shuffle or whatever. And so you hear the one song, you like it, and then you just start listening to the band. And then you have to find that personal connection, find a common theme with what they're writing or whatever it is. But I think just like you say, at that time, if you were there, you were there for some reason because your buddy told you about them or because you were selling, you know, printing their panties or whatever you were doing. But you went ahead and got that personal thing initially, and then you decided if you loved the band. And so
Printing their panties sounds like a Patterson Hood song, by the way.
just thinking like if that's not on a trucker's record, we need to send this to somebody.
Patterson, by the way.
Yeah, right.
If you're listening,
Yeah, please.
come on the show. Let's workshop printing their panties.
Let's talk about this.
We'll have Evan on. It'll be great. Man, that's all so good. That's a great story, and I'm really happy about that. I'm glad I asked you that question because I think about like when I'm in Athens, and I think I mythologize it a bit. You
Yeah,
know, I mean, I've only seen Widespread Panic once, but it was incredible. You know, like REM isn't my favorite band, but
yeah,
their influence is undeniable. You know, I mean, we could go on and on and on about Athens, but every time I'm there, it feels like it's dripping with cool, and it's such a beautiful town, and like, so that's interesting you were there at that time because it had to have been fertile creatively for you, I would guess.
yeah. It was well, and it showed me kind of it was the first place that I understood because I was like in high school and stuff. I was I love, you know, I saw Widespread Panic a lot. I was a jam band guy. That was kind of my first the music that I played initially was that type of thing. And so living in Athens, and I would, you know, I would drive to Athens to go to shows and stuff, but living there, one, you'd get to see lots of cool bands in the big rooms, but then also you got to go see so many bands that were playing in these little 60, 80 seat strange places, but they had fans and they had a thing that they were doing. And so it was the first time that I was able to reference that you could, you know, that there was so much and that true creativity was rewarded if you stuck with it, because I had only my time going to concerts up until living there was always buying a ticket and going to a room with lots of other people. And so being in Athens was the first time that I could go in a room and see a band playing to 40 people, but all 40 people knew every word to the song. And there's such, you know, there so many good bands and so many just real freaks, especially around that time in Athens, that it gave me, I guess, a lot of creative freedom that I wouldn't have recognized otherwise, because I could go and see, you know, like I say, Panic might play to 10,000 people, or, and, you know, you had REM was just this, you know, commercial juggernaut. But then you could see guys very similar to those guys in REM playing some strange show in a coffee shop for 35 people. And so it was the first time that I was able to bridge the gap of like, oh, you know, REM wasn't like created in a lab. They're not just record industry thing. You know, I'd never thought much about how it happened, but that was the first place that I was able to see. And I was even able to watch, like at that time, there was the band that I got to kind of watch do it. And obviously not to the Truckers level or anything, but there was a band, Dead Confederate.
I love that fucking band.
Yeah. So they were, when I first got there, they were, you know, playing like there was a place Max Canada. It was like this strange little thing. And first time I saw Dead Confederate, it was like they were the second of four bands. Maybe there's like 28 of us in there to see all four bands. And so I watched them then, and I thought, man, they're cool. This is really cool. And then over the years that I was there, it went from them playing, with like 8 tickets sold to selling out the Georgia Theater, and so you got to see a lot of that and see it happen organically, which was not something I had even thought about much, but I just kind of, I felt there were two worlds of music in my life. There was like music that people make for creativity and enjoyment, and then there was this other world of success and a general operation. And Athens was really cool because I got to watch bands not change what they were doing, but their audience change and grow. And so it was a really cool thing for me to understand that, like, just do your thing. There's an audience for anything. And if you can continue doing your thing, you will develop and find the people that, it works for. And so Athens was just, I couldn't have gone to a better, I was not a good student. My formal education in Athens was a failure in every sense, but my education about life and what ended up being my career, I couldn't have asked for a better place to be educated on such things as that.
What were you ostensibly studying in college?
I was a communications major, you know.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
was really
yeah.
great student.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I would love to I would love to just have some video of, 18-year-old Evan sitting in those classes after, like Dead Confederate show till 4 o'clock in the morning and that 8 o'clock class. I'd like to see what I was really looking like to the world.
Yeah, was it just an empty seat? Is
Yeah.
this video just an empty seat?
Oh, God, it was so funny. It's funny, dude. Earlier, I got caught by a train on the way coming to sit down for this, but it was so funny. I lived on Hancock Street in Athens, and so about 2 blocks down was kind of right there at Prince Street. There's this big railroad track, and that was always, comes across Prince going to campus, and that was always the joke with our roommates is like, I'd half wake up in the morning, and if you heard the train whistle, we would always just say, train got me, man. No way I'm making it to class on time.
Yeah, I got train whistles
Yeah.
from my college days too. I eventually became a very good student, but not so much for the first.
Yeah. I always tell myself, that I wish I had done better, and I would love to even be educated in that way now because I allow myself to think about things other than just like, where are we going? What are we doing? But like I say, I didn't get the education that I moved to Athens for, but I got one that I didn't expect that has been ultimately beneficial in life. So I have a deep, deep love for that town.
Man, I was just talking about, and we can get off Athens here in a second, but it is like nostalgic for me at that time too, and especially earlier, like in 2000 to 2002 or so, that pretty short period of time, I know, but still, there was a lot of like, a lot of the red dirt and Texas country guys were coming
Yeah.
through the South, and they would always play the Georgia Theater. So like I saw Pat Green there, and Cross Canyon Ragweed, and all those bands that I was really into at that time. I just did a bonus episode of the Marinade about that whole time and how like Athens was a spot they would all stop. So we would road trip up there to see these bands.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so cool for them. And I lived on, like I say, the Hancock Avenue where I lived. We lived about 2 blocks back from Lumpkin. And so we could walk, it was like a 4-minute walk to the Georgia Theater from the house that I lived in all in college. And so, if anybody walked in the Georgia Theater 03 through about 08, I was, just living there.
We probably rubbed shoulders, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Man, I was a mainstay in that place for years.
Great. That's great, dude. Okay, so a couple more things I want to ask you about. One is, and we can cut this out if this isn't public knowledge yet, but like that night I talked to Joe a little bit, and I think you and I talked briefly about like what's on the horizon for you. Can you are you publicly talking about that right now musically or?
Yeah, to some level, not a whole lot, but man, I've gotten through Joe. Like I was saying earlier, I met Joe through a studio session, and we ended up not going forward with that session so much. But Joe and I stayed in touch, and then when it got time to make another record, Joe has made he's produced all sorts of stuff for crazy artists, and so he works with a guy. Matter of fact, Ken Coomer, and he was the drummer in Uncle Tupelo, and then Wilco at one point. So he and Joe work a lot together. So we are about halfway. Halfway is probably not even right. We're probably about 30% of the way through a new record, and so I don't like we say. Maybe not professionally. I'm not talking about it yet because I don't know exactly how we'll put it out or what it'll be. But we're working on that. We'll have it done sometime in the fall, and then hopefully we'll have it out maybe by summer or fall of next year, just depending on what we know. Because the landscape of making a record is strange now because for years you made records and you sold records and you made money, and now you may sell some records, but you're making money on the shows. And so I guess the time frame on the release is something that I don't know because I don't know what we'll come up with as far as how we're going to release it or who we'll release it with or what. But so we're in the early stages of just we've got 5 songs that are tracked but not complete. So we're pretty early in the record cycle. But yeah, hopefully, definitely 2026 sometime we'll have a new record. And I think that it will, you always like to think your next one's going to be your best one. So that's I always say that. And then I catch myself like, yeah, I think you said that last time too.
Well, that's the goal, right? And I mean, having Joe involved, and then also Ken Coomer. For folks listening, you may remember, Ken hasn't been on the show. I should get him on the show. That'd be great.
Dude, one, he's been everywhere and done everything. 2, he is as smart and cool and kind, and I couldn't say enough good things about Ken Coomer. Obviously, for what you could read about him on the internet, he's so cool and has been a part of so much stuff and is just incredible. But man, for a guy with his accolades, he is just as humble and enjoyable. I mean, just I was nervous going to meet him because I knew kind of who he was, and you're always like, man, what will a guy like this think of me? And he's been so warm and kind and lovely to me. And then obviously creatively and musically, he's all anyone could dream of. But man, yeah, you should have Ken on because he's got all the stories and is just a genuinely lovely human being to talk.
I keep hearing that about him, and because he produced. I had Ryan Anderson from Bendigo Fletcher on the show years ago. He produced their record "Fits of Laughter," and man, I have a CD copy of that record that I go back to all the time. It's just so good,
dude. He is so good, and he has this ability to prompt things in a way that doesn't make you feel like. I've worked with people before that they had ideas and not bad ideas, but the way they tried to implement them just made it tough to connect. Ken has this wild ability to calmly, it's almost like he doesn't say the thing he wants you to do. It's like, I mean, he's just mind blowing. Like he did, and he's got a very informal way about it. Like I've told the story to a lot of people because it's, for me, the studio, I mean, I've gotten comfortable with it over the years, but it's usually not the most comfortable setting. Like I'm very comfortable on a stage. I've spent thousands of hours on a stage, and I've spent a lot less time in the studio. And so it's strange, the mix in your headphones and just the isolated nature of it is strange. But Ken, we were working on, and I couldn't even call which song it was now. I'm sure once I listen back, I'll know. But he had me play the this strange old guitar, and it had these gold foil pickups, which have this really tinny, crisp sound to them. And he was like, just try to play it, just like you would fronting a band. And so I was, I would hear it in my headphones and I was being real timid, I guess, with how I was playing it because it sounded so different. And so he came in there and he was like, all right, dude, just take your headphones off. And I was like, okay. He was like, I'm just going to turn the mix of the song up and you're not really even going to hear this guitar. He was like, just play the guitar like you're just playing a fucking guitar along with this song. And you don't even know this song. Just play that guitar. So I took my headphones off, couldn't hear my guitar mix at all. I'm just kind of sitting there dicking around. And then you finish it and you go into the room and Ken hits the playback button and it's just everything you dreamed of, And so he just has this insane calm nature about him. He knows what he wants and he has a way of getting it out of you that he inspires you and doesn't limit you and doesn't make you feel, I don't know, he constantly says stuff like, we want it to sound like you. And that's not something a lot of people say. A lot of times you hear in a studio, they're like, think about this, try to do it like this. And Ken's constant go-to is, we want it to sound like you. That's what we're doing here. And he's just a reassuring, calm guy who, and on top of all that, he's a world-class drummer. Just, dude, he did some things that were, like I told him at the end of one of the tracks, I was like, man, I've always my whole life listened to tracks with these really cool drum things that were just, the whole track was drums. And I was like, and I don't know if you noticed it or not, but we just did one. Like if this was someone else's track, I would be like, fuck, why can't I do one like that? And so he's the guy that you want in every facet of the game. He's beautiful, easy, smart, creative, and his skill set is, he's just a fucking dream in a studio, man. Just really all you could hope for.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. I'm really looking forward to hearing those new tunes.
I am.
Man, this this conversation has flown by and it's been such a blast. But we usually start to wrap things up with what you're getting down on. So the art that has you fired up at the moment.
Yeah.
I noticed you posted a picture of you reading the other day. It could be a book you're reading. It could be music. It could be anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I put that. I got Brian Wilson passing away a couple weeks ago. I knew of him, but I've got a friend, Chris Schroeder. He's a great friend of mine. Lives down in Florida, and he's he's got one of those record collections that you're just like, holy, like I could just sit in his house for, not even listening, just like looking, being like, wow, do you really have this pressing of the Beatles' White Album? And he's like, yeah, I got two of them. One I bought in England and one I bought in the United States. He's just like everything. So we got to talking about Brian Wilson, and Chris he knows, just he doesn't play, but he's a listener and just has studied music. He knows every story and every detail about everything. And so we got to talking about Brian Wilson. And I was just made the comment. I was like, I wish I knew more. I was like, I know Pet Sounds and, I know about him, but I don't know enough. And so Chris is the kind of guy. So like, the next morning before I leave town, he like calls me and he was like, here, come by here and borrow this book. And so I've been reading that. It's about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys and the Southern California experience as a whole, which is that time. And it's a really cool thing. And then, man, musically, obviously I'm a Townes Van Zandt junkie. And so I keep a lot of that going, and I'm trying to think of, and the last thing that I guess has really like blown my skirt. James McMurtry put out a new record recently, Black Dog and the Wandering Boy. And he's the king for me of people that are really doing it. He just is he's nobody writes them. I couldn't say anyone writes them better than McMurtry. So that new record's been there, a lot. I've been on Vincent Neil Emerson.
That guy's good, man.
Man, I've been on some of that lately. And 49 Winchester is one that's come across pretty recently that I really like the sound of that band. It's kind of got a Truckers-esque or Lucero-esque, like rocking guitars, and still some songs that make sense. So that new McMurtry has definitely been my mainstay here in the last, I don't know how it's been out for 3 or 4 weeks. And I've probably listened to the entire record, like 50 times in the past weeks.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have now been on the same podcast as James McMurtry and Isaac Gibson from 49 Winchester.
Really
But,
great.
yeah. But same with that McMurtry record, dude. Like, and the last one,
All of them.
Horses and the Hounds, was like one of his best, and I just like can't believe how much he can, because he's so interesting because he does not play by anybody's rules, and
He is, oh, dude. And I read an interview which was so strange to me, like his dad being like one of the great American writers. I was reading an interview the other day where he said that he doesn't read a lot. He says, his quote was, maybe I read a book a year, but I've definitely missed a handful of years. And then he said, I'm not much of a fan of prose. And I was thinking, like, this guy writes like he's writing the great American novel in every song, and he's just out here being like, I don't really read all that much.
he put out 14 songs. And each one's the best fucking song you've ever heard. I don't get it, man. Yeah.
I tell people all the time is there's never a low spot on a McMurtry record, dude. He's just mine.
And he writes with such, I don't want to get too deep into it because I've talked about this on the show before. And I
Yeah.
don't want to bore people, but like he writes with such romance, and if you meet him in person, you would think this man is the least romantic motherfucker I've ever met in my life.
I had that experience the first time I ever saw him. I was like, just like, because I knew that he was very grassroots, and that, like, he goes to the merch stand afterwards, and he's just not big on a lot of crew. He's frugal, and so I was just like replaying in my mind. I was like, man, I'm just about to have like a conversation of such depth that I can't imagine. And then, we talked about, like, I said something and he just responded that he kind of liked to go catch fish. And, our conversation was just like dead immediately. And I was like, man, this guy's my fucking hero in all facets of the game. He does.
Yeah.
Dude,
everybody's got that story about him too. Like anybody that's ever met him, it's always because he's not a dick, but he's like he's just not going to give you more than you ask him a question. He's going to answer your question. And that's it.
And he's not, he's fucking doesn't have time. He's got to go write these fucking songs.
And only put out a record like every 5 years. That's the other thing that like drives me crazy about him is like,
I know, man.
I want a new McMurtry record every year. He's like, nah, you got to wait 5. I've been fishing for the last 5 years.
That's what I saw an interview when he put out the last one. They said, why so long in record cycles? And his answer was, because that's how fucking long it takes.
Yeah. Dude, what a pleasure. I mean, I am so grateful we connected, and I'm so grateful that folks are going to get to hear this conversation, and I'm really excited for the new stuff, and just thank you. This was awesome.
Likewise. It was lovely to meet you and so great to connect, and I really appreciate you having me on, and hopefully we'll be in touch again soon, and maybe we'll get to talk about the new record when it comes around.
Hey, you got digital real estate whenever you want it here. I'd love to reconnect when that record comes out and do this whole thing over again.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Awesome, bud. Thank you. Take care. Evan Barber, y'all. Thank you so much, Evan. Thank all of you for listening. EvanBarber.net for all things Evan Barber. The song you're hearing in this episode is North Florida from Evan's record Until the Thunder. MarinadePodcast.com for all things The Marinade. Follow us on all the socials. We're even back on Facebook, y'all. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support The Marinade. Go do that right now while you're listening, please. It makes a huge difference for us and costs so little of your time and energy. This is feature episode 200, y'all. We have passed the 8-year mark. The Marinade has been out in the world for 8 years, which means that this month, really this weekend, today's the 15th I'm recording this of October 2025. And that means 9 years. 2016 is when I recorded the first episodes for what would have become the first episode, the first conversations that would have become the first episodes of The Marinade. 9 years, y'all. almost a decade into this thing, and the idea itself is a decade old. And this is like, as I mentioned in the intro and during the conversation, this is such a Marinade Universe episode. I never anticipated how many relationships would come from this, and of various kinds. And I'm just continually in awe of this thing and the life it's taken on. You know, we're probably never going to be Marin or any of those folks, and that's fine. But it doesn't really matter, because I never thought about it like that. I always thought about it as a creative outlet and an opportunity to connect with people whose art I respect. And a lot of those people become my friends now, y'all. And I just want to thank you. Thank you so much. This Marinade Media thing continues to grow. It's been a lot of work. It continues to be a lot of work. And yet it continues to feel fulfilling. You know, I don't have any signs of slowing down. In fact, I think I'm going to continue to sort of ramp up my efforts. You know, it's been a while since the last episode, just because I started a new day job, and I've honestly taken on too much lately. So I'm learning lessons from that, and backing off of some things, and having to reschedule some things, and taking stock of how much time and energy I actually have. That said, I'm my foot's on the gas. Life's Greatest Hits is doing well. Go follow that on Instagram. You can get updates there. That show is my show with my friend Jordan Foley. We have a new episode coming out later this week about S.G. Goodman's Planting by the Signs. So check that out, y'all. Thank you so much for everybody for listening. I don't get too wrapped up in numbers on podcasting, as you guys know, but I am happy to report that show's doing just fine, and it's continuing to grow. So thank you for connecting with that show, and with me and Jordan. I got to officiate Jordan's wedding to his soulmate, Miss Mariah Lynn, over this last weekend. That was the big project I was working on. Is like, I didn't want to fuck that one up. You know, if I fuck something up, that's just me. That's different. But this is, you know, the only time they plan on doing this. So I've been really focused on that, and that has kind of taken up a lot of my time and energy. So I'm glad that it went so well. It was an absolutely beautiful day. So check it out, guys. Check out Life's Greatest Hits. If you really like what we're doing with this Marinade thing, consider joining our Patreon community, guys. So much stuff coming up. I got a new festival. Somebody, shout out to my buddy Blaine for turning me on to a new festival up in Charleston that I'm thinking about. There's just so much stuff that I am able to do because of the generosity of our Patreon patrons. So head on over to patreon.com/Marinade Podcast if you'd like exclusive content and want to connect with the show in that way. We also have a Substack that I am desperately trying to keep up with as well. So if you prefer that platform, we got some stuff over there, and I get a little more political on Substack too. Got a lot of writing projects in the work, y'all. So marinadepodcast.com would be a good place to keep up with all of that, and Patreon as well. If you want to support the show financially, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, maybe you just enjoyed this conversation and want to tip me, that'd be awesome. Venmo or PayPal us just at the Marinade. We got to go to Bonnaroo last year. We're going to Orange Blossom Review again this year. Jen Ross and I are. Just so many wonderful things happening with the show, and I'm just incredibly grateful. Thank you. Thank you. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.